The rain lashed against the grand arched windows of the Viridian Gallery, turning the bustling London street outside into a watercolor blur. Inside, the air hummed with the low murmur of wealthy patrons and the clink of champagne flutes. Alara Vance, a junior curator with ink-stained fingers and a perpetually furrowed brow from deciphering faded provenance documents, felt utterly out of place. She was here only because her boss, the formidable Mrs. Thorne, had demanded her presence to schmooze potential donors, a task Alara found as appealing as cataloging water-damaged tax records. She hovered near a display of 18th-century miniature portraits, trying to disappear into the ornate wallpaper, when the gallery doors swung open. A gust of damp, cold air swept in, carrying with it a man who seemed to absorb the light. He wasn't conventionally handsome in a magazine cover way, but possessed a striking intensity, sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of storm-tossed sea glass, and an air of contained power that made the room subtly shift. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that spoke of old money and effortless authority. His gaze swept the room, dismissive, almost bored, until it landed on Alara. Time didn't just slow, it shattered. Alara's breath hitched. Her meticulously organized thoughts, the inventory list for the new acquisition, the overdue report on the Dutch masters, evaporated. All she saw was him. The way the light caught the silver thread in his lapel, the slight furrow between his brows as he looked at her, the impossible sense of recognition that flooded her chest, warm and terrifying. It felt less like meeting a stranger and more like finding a missing piece of herself she hadn't known was lost. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. He saw her too. His dismissive expression vanished, replaced by stunned stillness. His sea-glass eyes locked onto hers, widening almost imperceptibly. He took a step forward, then another, oblivious to the murmurs and curious glances he left in his wake. He stopped a mere foot away, the scent of rain, expensive wool, and something uniquely him, like old paper and bergamot, filling her senses. "Hello," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that vibrated in her bones. I feel as though I know you." Alara could only nod, her throat tight. "I feel the same," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them, sounding absurdly vulnerable in the opulent room. He introduced himself as Julian Thorne. Thorne. The name struck her like a physical blow. Mrs. Thorne's son? The notoriously reclusive heir to the Thorne fortune, rarely seen in public, rumored to be involved in shadowy international finance? The man whose family name was practically etched onto the gallery's foundation stone? Panic warred with the dizzying pull of that first sight. This was impossible. Dangerous. But Julian seemed equally captivated. He asked about her work, listened intently as she stammered about provenance research, his eyes never leaving hers. He spoke of his own passion for forgotten histories, for the stories hidden in objects. They talked for an hour, oblivious to the party winding down around them, the rain easing to a drizzle. When he finally asked for her number, his hand brushing hers as he took her card, the spark was undeniable, electric. He promised to call. He called the next day. And the next. And the next. Their connection deepened with astonishing speed. Julian was erudite, surprisingly gentle beneath his reserved exterior, and shared her love for obscure historical details and rainy afternoons in quiet cafes. He took her to hidden bookshops, to concerts in intimate halls, to his family's sprawling, slightly melancholic country estate, Thornfield Manor. He spoke of his mother, Mrs. Thorne, with a complex mix of duty and distance. Alara, usually guarded, found herself opening up completely, sharing her dreams of becoming a lead curator, her insecurities, her quiet love for the city. The love at first sight feeling wasn't just a spark, it felt like coming home. 6 months later, under a canopy of ancient oaks at Thornfield, Julian knelt on one knee. Rain threatened again, mirroring their first meeting. "Alara Vance," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "from the moment I saw you in that gallery, I knew my life had irrevocably changed. You are my home. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Alara's face, mingling with the first drops of rain. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The world felt perfect, gilded by the certainty of their connection. The engagement was announced with Thorne family fanfare. Ilara was swept into a whirlwind of fittings, society events, and planning a wedding that felt more like a state occasion than a personal celebration. Mrs. Thorne, initially coolly polite, seemed to thaw slightly, offering sharp but practical advice. Julian was attentive, loving, but Ilara sometimes caught a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking, a shadow, a tension around his mouth. She dismissed it as pre-wedding nerves. The twist began subtly, almost a week before the wedding. Ilara, researching a potential donation for the gallery, stumbled upon an old newspaper archive online. A headline from 15 years ago. Thorne heir missing. Julian Thorne, 10, vanishes from school grounds. Her blood ran cold. She clicked frantically. The article detailed the frantic search for young Julian Thorne, the son of the late Arthur Thorne and his wife, Eleanor. It mentioned the immense reward, the police investigation that went cold, and the fact that Julian was never found. Confusion warred with disbelief. But Julian is here. He's real. He's my fiancé. She confronted him that evening, her voice trembling. Julian, this article, it says you were kidnapped? Missing? He paled, his usual composure cracking. He took her hands, his grip tight. Ilara, please. It's complicated. A very painful time. I was found eventually, but the details, the trauma. I've never spoken of it. My mother, she couldn't bear to relive it. Please, just trust me. It's in the past. His distress seemed genuine, his plea heartfelt. Ilara, drowning in love and the proximity of their wedding, pushed the unease down. He's been through hell. He doesn't want to remember. She kissed him, whispering reassurances. The unease returned, sharper, 2 days before the wedding. While helping Mrs. Thorne sort through old family albums in the Manor's library, Ilara found a photograph tucked behind a loose page in a heavy ledger. It showed a boy of about 10, with the same intense sea-glass eyes and sharp features as Julian, standing proudly beside a man who looked remarkably like the late Arthur Thorne. The caption, in faded ink, "My beloved son, Julian, and his father, Arthur. Summer, 2008. But the boy in the photo. Ilara's curator's eye, trained to spot minute details, froze. The boy's left ear. It had a small, distinctive notch on the lobe. Julian's left ear was perfectly smooth. She'd traced it with her fingers countless times. A cold dread, deeper than before, began to coil in her stomach. That night, unable to sleep, she crept into Julian's study, a room he usually kept locked, but the door was ajar. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating stacks of files. Drawn by a morbid compulsion, she opened the top drawer of his desk. Inside, beneath financial statements, was a manila folder labeled simply, Project Phoenix. Her hands shook as she opened it. Not financial documents. Photographs. Dozens of them. Surveillance photos of her. Ilara Vance. Leaving her flat. Walking to the gallery. Sitting in cafes with friends. Even one taken through her bedroom window. The curtains were thin. Dates spanned the entire 6 months of their relationship. Notes in Julian's precise handwriting accompanied some. Target exhibits strong emotional response to historical artifacts, particularly 18th century. Vulnerability confirmed. Initial contact successful. Target displays classic signs of love at first sight susceptibility. Proceeding to phase 2. Mother's approval secured. Target fully invested. Phoenix protocol on track. The world tilted. The love, the connection, the homecoming, it was all a meticulously constructed lie. A performance. Project Phoenix. A floorboard creaked behind her. She whirled around. Julian stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light. His expression wasn't the loving fiancé's. It was cold, calculating, utterly devoid of the warmth she'd cherished. The mask was off. Ilara, he said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth, flat and professional. I see you've found the operational file. Operational file? Her voice was a strangled whisper. Who are you? What is this? He stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind him. The man she loved was gone, replaced by a stranger with familiar eyes. "My name is Julian Thorne," he stated, leaning against the desk, crossing his arms. Biologically, anyway. The boy in that photo? That was the real Julian Thorne. My predecessor, he explained, his tone chillingly detached. 15 years ago, the real Julian Thorne was kidnapped. But he wasn't just taken, he was replaced. By him. "I was recruited, Julian," the imposter said, a flicker of something dark in his eyes. "Trained from childhood. My mission, infiltrate the Thorne family, assume Julian's identity, and gain control of the Thorne fortune and its extensive, less public holdings. My handlers saw an opportunity when the real Julian vanished. They provided me, a lookalike orphan with the right build, the right potential, and the resources to disappear him permanently." Alara felt sick. You killed him?" A shadow crossed his face, the first hint of something resembling regret, quickly buried. "It was necessary. The mission required absolute authenticity. No loose ends." He paused, his gaze sharpening as it fixed on her. "And you, Alara Vance, were always part of the endgame. Phase 3. Secure the inheritance." He walked closer, his movements predatory. "Mrs. Thorne is terminally ill. She has weeks, maybe days. Her will leaves the bulk of the estate, including controlling shares in Thorne Holdings, to her son and his wife. A clause added after our engagement, ensuring the fortune stays within the family unit. He smiled, a cold, mirthless curve of his lips. "Our marriage wasn't about love, Alara. It was the final key. Your name on the marriage certificate, your presence as the grieving widow alongside the devoted son, it legitimizes everything. It ensures no one questions the transfer of assets when she dies. Project Phoenix culminates in matrimony." The love at first sight wasn't magic. It was targeting. He'd been chosen for his resemblance, trained to mimic Julian's mannerisms, and deployed to find the perfect, unsuspecting bride, someone intelligent enough to be credible, passionate enough to seem genuine, but without powerful connections who might dig too deep. Alara, the dedicated but unassuming curator, was the perfect pawn. The gallery meeting? Orchestrated. He'd known she'd be there. The recognition? A carefully rehearsed line to trigger her own romantic susceptibility. The horror was absolute. The man she'd given her heart to, whose touch she craved, whose future she'd dreamed of, was a ghost wearing her fiancé's skin, a killer and a con artist using her as a tool for theft on a monumental scale. The wedding wasn't a celebration, it was the final act of a long, cruel con. "You monster," she breathed, backing away, her hand instinctively going to the heavy brass letter opener on the desk. He sighed, as if disappointed by her reaction. "Don't be dramatic, Alara. Think of the life we could have. Wealth beyond imagining. Power. You'd never want for anything. And I have come to appreciate you. Your intelligence, your spirit. It wouldn't all be a lie." He took another step. "The wedding is in 2 days. You will be there. You will say, 'I do.' And you will play your part perfectly. Or..." His eyes flickered towards the window, towards the dark woods surrounding Thornfield. "The real Julian Thorne won't be the only one who vanishes without a trace." The threat hung in the air, colder than the rain outside. Alara's mind raced. Run? But where? He had resources, connections, probably people watching her. Fight? He was stronger. The letter opener felt flimsy in her hand. Then a memory surfaced. During one of their early dates, Julian had mentioned, almost offhandedly, his extensive security protocols at Thornfield, a remnant of his traumatic past. He'd shown her the panic button disguised as a bookend in the library, a direct line to a private security firm his mother used. His mother. Mrs. Thorne. Did she know? The next day, under the pretense of choosing final floral arrangements, Alara requested a private meeting with Mrs. Thorne in her sunroom. The older woman looked frail, propped up on pillows, but her eyes, the same sea glass green as her son's, the imposter's, held a sharp, weary intelligence. "Mrs. Thorne," Alara began, her voice trembling but clear, "I need to show you something." She placed the manila folder on the small table between them. "And I need to ask you about your son." Mrs. Thorne's gaze didn't waver from Alara's face. She didn't look at the folder. A long, heavy silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of an ornate clock. Then, slowly, a tear traced a path down her parchment-thin cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "I know," she whispered, her voice raspy but steady. "I've known for years." Alara stared, stunned. "You knew? And you let him? What choice did I have?" Mrs. Thorne's voice gained strength, laced with bitterness. "After Arthur died, after my Julian was taken, this creature appeared. He looked like my son. He knew things only Julian would know, things fed to him by his handlers, I realize now. He was plausible. And he had leverage." She closed her eyes briefly. "He knew things about Arthur. Things that could destroy the Thorne name, the company, everything. He threatened to expose it all if I didn't accept him, if I didn't play along. He promised to be a dutiful son, to preserve the legacy, as long as I kept silent and signed what he put in front of me." She opened her eyes, fixing Alara with a desperate intensity. "I am dying, child. And I cannot let him win. I cannot let him steal my son's name and his inheritance. But I am too weak, too compromised, to stop him myself." She reached out a trembling hand, not for the folder, but for Alara's. You have his heart, or what passes for it in that hollow chest. He wants you. Use that. Find a way. Before it's too late." The wedding day dawned unnervingly bright. Alara stood in the grand Thornfield ballroom, transformed into a chapel of white roses and gilded chairs. Guests murmured, admiring the opulence. She wore the gown, a masterpiece of silk and lace, feeling like a sacrificial lamb in a beautiful cage. Her bouquet felt heavy, like a weapon she didn't know how to wield. Julian stood at the altar, resplendent in mourning dress, the picture of the devoted groom. His eyes met hers, and for a fleeting second, she saw the charming fiancé she'd fallen for. Then the mask of calculation slid back into place. "Play your part." The organ swelled. Alara began her walk down the aisle, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She passed Mrs. Thorne, seated in a wheelchair near the front, her face pale but resolute. Their eyes locked. A silent plea. A silent promise. As she reached Julian, the officiant began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved." The words felt like ash in Alara's mouth. She looked at Julian, at the man who had orchestrated her heartbreak, who had murdered a child, who was using her as a pawn. The love was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fury. If any person can show just cause why they may not lawfully be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Silence. Heavy, expectant. Julian's lips curved in a subtle, satisfied smile. He thought he'd won. Alara took a deep breath. She didn't look at the officiant. She looked directly into Julian's sea-glass eyes, the eyes that had first captivated her, now revealing their true, empty depths. "I object," she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the silence like shattered glass. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Julian's smile vanished, replaced by icy fury. "Alara, don't be foolish." "I object," she repeated, louder, turning to face the stunned guests. "Because this man standing before you is not Julian Thorne." She pointed a trembling finger. "He is an imposter. A fraud. He murdered the real Julian Thorne 15 years ago and stole his life. He's only marrying me to steal the Thorne fortune." Chaos erupted. Shouts, cries of disbelief, chairs scraping. Julian lunged for her, his face contorted with rage. "You stupid girl. You've ruined everything." But before he could reach her, two figures in dark suits, Mrs. Thorne's discreet security, alerted by the panic button Alara had pressed during her meeting, stepped smoothly between them, blocking Julian's path. Mrs. Thorne, with a strength that belied her frailty, raised a hand. "Enough, Sebastian," she commanded, using the name she'd always called the imposter, a name only she and his handlers knew. "It's over." Julian froze, the color draining from his face as he realized the game was truly up. The carefully constructed facade of Julian Thorne crumbled, revealing the desperate, cornered operative beneath. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Police. Interpol. Revelations about a shadowy organization specializing in identity theft and corporate espionage. Julian, Sebastian, was arrested, his network unraveling. The Thorne fortune was secured, with Mrs. Thorne, in her final days, establishing a trust in the real Julian's name and appointing Ilara as a key advisor, recognizing her integrity and courage. Ilara stood on the steps of the Viridian Gallery months later, the rain falling softly again. She wasn't a curator anymore. She was the newly appointed director of special acquisitions, tasked with rebuilding the gallery's reputation and integrity. The memory of that first sight still haunted her, the visceral pull, the overwhelming sense of destiny. But now she understood its true nature, not magic, but manipulation. A predator recognizing prey. She looked out at the rain-slicked street, no longer seeing a watercolor blur, but the sharp, clear lines of reality. Love at first sight, she realized, was a dangerous myth. True connection was built on truth, on time, on weathering storms together, not on a carefully staged illusion in a gilded cage. And sometimes, the most profound love story wasn't about finding your other half, but about finding the strength to shatter the mirror that showed you a lie and walking away into the uncertain, but honest, rain. The ache for the man she thought he was remained, a phantom limb of the heart, but it was overshadowed by a hard-won peace. She was free. And the gallery, like her future, was finally hers to shape, authentically, one genuine piece at a time.